PR. Promoting dialogue.
It's midday here in Dakar and 1 p.m. in Lagos, Nigeria. Good afternoon and welcome to Newslink, live on West Africa Democracy Radio 94.9 FM and around the world on wadr.org. First, the top stories. U.S. government issues terror alert warning for its citizens in Nigeria. Tensions rise as border dispute between Liberia and Guinea escalates.
Guinea Armed Forces came heavily armed. We started the engagement. Why are they planting poles on our land? So they have no right planting flagpole on our land and posting their flag.
UN agency demands equitable justice for women and girls. And scorching heat in Mali disrupts daily livelihoods.
It's been incredibly hot lately. If the sun becomes unbearable, we have no choice but to stay under this tree until a customer arrives.
Please stay tuned for details of these stories and more.
On the news, this is a more edit.
Many thanks for joining our broadcast and a warm welcome to all of our listeners across the sub-region and beyond. We'll begin in Nigeria, where the United States government has issued a warning to its citizens about a potential terrorist threat aimed at American facilities and affiliated institutions in the country. This alert raises renewed concerns regarding the security situation in the country. Security analysts are also reacting to this latest warning. WDL's Abuja correspondent Yechino Sasichi reports.
The U.S. Embassy issued a security alert advising American citizens to exercise caution when visiting the embassy in Abuja, the U.S. consulate in Lagos, and affiliated schools in the country. According to the embassy, the warning follows heightened tensions after coordinated U.S. and Israeli military strikes against Iran, although specific details about the potential threats were not disclosed. Security analysts say while such alerts are often precautionary, they reflect the broader security challenges confronting the country. Former Director of the Department of State Services, DSS, Mike Ejiofor, says addressing the root causes of insecurity remains critical to achieving lasting stability, noting that dialogue and peace negotiations may play an important role alongside military operations.
There's need for Iran, United States, Israel to go back to the negotiating table. In fact, we need intervention. The United Nations, even though America might not listen, need to intervene in this crisis. And world leaders and security world powers should come and intervene. The effect of this war is global.
The DSS former director adds that sustained engagement with affected communities and non-violent actors could help reduce tensions and prevent further escalation of conflict.
Because I'm concerned too about Nigeria. They have Iranian sympathizers in Nigeria who are either misinformed or misdirected. They will start attacking Iranian or U.S. interests in Nigeria. So we also have to be vigilant and be alert that such incidents don't take place in the country.
Nigerian authorities have since increased security presence around sensitive locations, particularly in Abuja, amid concerns over possible protests and security risks. For the Billy ADR, Yechino Sasitu in Abuja.
Meanwhile, tensions are escalating along the border between Liberia and Guinea. This follows the breakdown of negotiations between local officials from both countries. The dispute revolves around accusations that armed Guinean soldiers crossed into Liberian territory, halting the Foya-Vahum Road project and seizing construction equipment. The incident occurred near the Solumba border in Lufa County, located in Liberia's northern region. WDL's Monrovia correspondent Abraham Parker reports.
According to residents in Lofa County, Guinean soldiers crossed into Liberia and stopped work being carried out by the BK Construction Enterprise. The soldiers on Tuesday hosted the Guinean flag on the Liberian side of the border, claiming ownership of the territory. This action was met with resistance from residents who subsequently took down the Guinean flag and raised the Liberian flag. Here is a narration from a resident regarding the situation.
This morning, the Guinea Armed Forces came heavily armed. We started the engagement. Why are they planting poles on our land? They already asked us to take our poles. They have no right planting flagpole on our land and posting their flag. We started to drive up in engagement. We talked and we were able to mobilize men, joined by our brothers from the various Kisi towns and other villages. When they came, we were able to overwhelm them, told them to fight, How can my country be older than your country, then you draw demarcation with me? Where were you when I was independent and you were on a colony you were able to offer your people the replanted hours?
Meanwhile, the Liberian government has assured its citizens that it is actively addressing the situation through diplomatic channels. In a statement, the government emphasized its commitment to resolving the issue peacefully. President Joseph Boakai has dispatched a high-level interministerial delegation to the Bolo comprising representatives from the Ministries of Defense, Local Government, Foreign Affairs, and Justice. The delegation is tasked with addressing the current situation at the Bolo. For Newslink on WADR, Abraham Parker, Monrovia.
Away from border disputes, UN Women, in partnership with the United Nations Office on Drugs and Crime, UNODC, is calling for urgent action to make equitable justice a transformative force for women and girls. The call is contained in a joint statement issued after the commemoration of International Women's Day 2026. In the original open title, Making Equitable Justice a Driver of Transformation for Women and Girls in West and Central Africa, the UN organizations warn that persistent barriers to justice fuel violence, impunity, and instability. Usman Umar reports.
The report underscores the realities faced across the region. Despite legislative efforts, the legal, institutional, and social barriers that limit access to justice and protection for women and girls still exist. The statement highlights that currently, girls represent nearly 70% victims of trafficking cases in West Africa. Mirele Kamitatu, Deputy Director of UN Women for West and Central Africa, sheds light on the steps taken by UN Women to address the challenges faced in addressing trafficking of girls in the region.
Looking at anti-trafficking responses, women are fairly represented. And that's the lens that we are taking on. First, building capacity for institutions to understand the conditions in which women are being trafficked. Also, designing gender responsive to trafficking so that in terms of the services that they are accessing, but also in terms of representation of women in law enforcement, judicial services.
While there have been various commitments by governments in the region to address issues related to women and girls, including the commitment to the Convention on the Elimination of All Forms of Discrimination Against Women, CEDAW, Mirele Kamitatu reflects on the challenges affecting the effectiveness of these laws.
One issue that is really still pending is how well those laws and policies are being implemented. And that is where having more women as judges, as police officers, and also emerging police areas such as forensics, but also community policing makes a difference.
The joint statement emphasized that by investing in women's leadership, closing funding gaps, and scaling proven initiatives, the region can turn barriers into lasting opportunities for women and girls.
Usman Umar filed that report.
More stories coming up on West Africa Democracy Radio. Newslink continues.
Meanwhile, in Côte d'Ivoire, Amnesty International is denouncing the continued detention of several people arrested during opposition protests in October 2025. Among the detained individuals are pregnant women and others who allegedly had no involvement in the demonstrations. The human rights organization says some of the prisoners are experiencing deplorable health conditions in prison. Abdullah Hassan has the details in this report.
In a press statement issued on Tuesday, Amnesty International stated that several of the individuals arrested during the October protests have been convicted in unfair trials in which they were denied a lawyer. While denouncing the deplorable health conditions of detained prisoners, the human rights organization expresses serious concerns about the situation of 3 pregnant women who it says are still being held at the Abidjan prison complex since their arrest last year. Claire and Felix, a researcher at Amnesty International West and Central Africa Bureau, condemns this situation.
Being pregnant in detention must be very difficult because this is not an environment that is favorable for pregnant women. We have been told that they do not have the prenatal care appropriate, and also they're afraid that they would give birth in detention.
The human rights organization says The use of blanket bans on protests in October 2025 was a stark failure of the Ivorian authorities to uphold international human rights to peaceful assembly. In this context, Claire Ann Felix says,
the ban was not in accordance with international law, so we just call on the government to organize the appeals and the first trial as soon as possible, and also to respect the right to a fair trial and the prisoners' rights.
It should be noted that a few weeks before the October 2025 presidential election in Côte d'Ivoire, the prefect of Abidjan banned a peaceful gathering planned for October 4 by opposition parties to denounce the exclusion of 2 candidates from the presidential election. Despite the ban, several young people and opposition party activists attempting to gather peacefully were arrested. More than 50 people were sentenced to 3 years in prison for disturbing public order, among other charges.
Abdullah Hassan reporting there. We turn our attention to the Central Sahel region, particularly Mali, where the heat wave is gradually increasing across the entire country. The National Meteorological Agency, Mali Meteo, is warning of a significant rise in temperatures nationwide. Between March 9 and 15, highs could reach between 34 and 45 degrees Celsius. In the capital Bamako, the situation is already impacting the daily lives of many residents. Sanko tells us more in this report.
At midday, as the sun reaches its zenith, some motorcycle taxi drivers seek shelter from the heat. In the shade of a tree, Michel Kamate and his colleagues take a break to avoid heat stroke while hoping for potential customers.
It's been incredibly hot lately. If the sun becomes unbearable, we have no choice but to stay under this tree until a customer arrives. It's the only way to protect ourselves from this intense heat wave, which could have serious consequences for our health.
On the roads of Bamako, commuters are also feeling the effects of these high temperatures, a situation that makes travel difficult.
What I usually do is from 2 p.m. onwards, I don't go out anymore. I stay indoors and often I drink a lot of water to rehydrate.
Faced with this situation, health specialists recommend taking precautions to avoid heat-related illnesses. According to them, prolonged exposure to heat can cause heat stroke or heat exhaustion. Dr. Saliu Mohammadou, physician at Gabriel Toure Hospital.
Now, the advice we can give people is to avoid going out when it's very hot outside, drink plenty of water, and always seek shelter. We also often see parents leaving children or elderly people in parked vehicles. This should be avoided.
According to Mali Meteo, this rise in temperatures is expected to continue for several days. The organization urges the public to remain vigilant and adopt simple measures to limit the effects of the heat.
Aliu Cham's report in Bamako and voiced by Sankule Janko. Elsewhere, the Gambia National Assembly is reviewing a long-awaited report about the sale and disposal of assets belonging to former President Yahya Jammeh. Prepared by a special select committee, the report contains findings of an investigation into how the assets linked to the former leader were handled after he left office in 2017. Abdul Sise, who is the committee chairperson, presented the 324-page document to lawmakers on Tuesday, following 4 months of inquiries and public hearings. From Banjul, WDL Sangdana Mendy reports.
The committee says its inquiry included testimonies from more than 70 witnesses and the review of thousands of documents from several state institutions. These include the Ministry of Justice, the Central Bank of the Gambia, and other agencies involved in managing and disposing of the assets. According to the reports, the investigation uncovered a number of systematic failures, institutional weaknesses, and significant financial discrepancies. Chairperson Abdoulaye Cissé presented the findings to lawmakers.
These include deficiencies in documentation, inconsistencies in valuation processes, challenges in asset preservation and record keeping, gaps in institutional coordination, and shortcomings in the management and reconciliation of proceeds arising from the sales of assets.
Meanwhile, lawmakers also raised concerns about a lack of transparency and administrative challenges surrounding the sale and disposal process of Yahya Jammeh's assets.
The property, Bigelow TDA, 3.75 hectares. The Director General did not report any form of allocation transactions being made therein.
Problem was not the ambiguity in the court order itself, but the failure of the Ministry of Justice. We found one discrepancy of head of cattle as well as 180 unaccounted for.
Among its key recommendations, the Legislative Committee calls on the executive branch through the National Police to open criminal investigations into the supervision of the Public Prosecutor's Office. The proposed probe would look into the role of former Attorney General and Justice Minister Abubakar M. Tambedu. The committee says investigators should examine allegations of possible violations of the Public Finance Act, abuse of office, and other economic crimes linked to the handling of the assets. If sufficient evidence is found, criminal proceedings should be initiated in line with Gambian law. For Newslink on West Africa Democracy Radio, I am Sangdana Mendy, reporting from Banjul.
In Ghana, several trade associations are responding to the government's immediate ban on the land transit of certain commodities. The items include rice, sugar, and cooking oil. This measure is part of the government's efforts to protect its revenue and reduce smuggling by prohibiting the transport of these materials across the country's borders. WDL's Accra correspondent Nadia Etete reports.
Under the new measures, several widely traded commodities including rice, sugar, cooking oil, frozen food products, flour, textiles, canned tomatoes, pasta and certain pharmaceutical products will no longer be allowed to enter or transit through Ghana via land borders. Authorities say these goods must now be routed exclusively through the country's seaports. Officials believe the move will strengthen the monitoring of imports and transit trade, close loopholes that allow revenue leakages, and enhance customs oversight of goods moving through the country. The initiative has been welcomed by the Ghana Union of Traders Association GUTA, though the group is urging governments to tread cautiously, warning that the directive could affect genuine small-scale importers. Welfare officer for GUTA, Benjamin Yabua, explains.
Truly, yes, something has happened, and that is why the ministry is taking such measures. But to do a total ban, not considering even the quantity that we are talking about, but the total ban might be a problem, because then it can affect any maybe small-scale importers that are bringing goods legitimately into the system to pay legitimate duties to come and do their trading. You see, that is where the problem is. And when it trickles down to that level, then it affects some of our members.
Meanwhile, the Food and Beverages Association of Ghana, FABAG, has fully backed the government's decision, saying the directive will help address long-standing abuses of the land transfer system, where goods declared for neighboring countries are diverted into the Ghanaian market. The association is also urging the Ghana Revenue Authority and the Customs Division to strictly enforce the directive, while calling on government to expand the list of restricted goods to include fruit juices and similar products to prevent traders from evading the policy through misclassification. For WADR, Nadia Tete, Accra.
You're listening to Newslink on West Africa Democracy Radio, 94.9 FM Dakar, and online at wadr.org. Here is a reminder of our top stories. U.S. government issues terror alert warning for its citizens in Nigeria. Tensions rise as border disputes escalate between Liberia and Guinea. UN agency demands equitable justice for women and girls, and scorching heat in Mali disrupts daily livelihoods. And still ahead, we do have the press review, a guest interview, and sports news. Please stay with us.
West Africa Democracy Radio. It's you speaking.
Don't forget you can listen to us live on wadr.org and follow live streamings on YouTube and Facebook. Now to electoral matters. In Guinea, the General Directorate of Elections is regulating the financing of electoral campaigns for the upcoming legislative and municipal elections. Financial obligations include deposits ranging from $3,900 to $35,000, approximately 34 or 294 million Guinean francs, and a spending limit of up to 1.34 million per list, roughly 11.76 billion Guinean francs. The legislative and municipal elections are scheduled for May 24, 2026. Chris Vaticha completes the story.
The deposit amount required from each candidate or list of candidates varies depending on the type of election. The amount include 300 million Guinean francs, approximately $33,500 for national list and legislative elections, 100 million Guinean francs, which is also equivalent to $11,150 for single-member or multiple-member candidacies, and 35,000 Guinean francs, which is about $3,900 for municipal lists. These deposits must be paid into accounts specifically opened at the branches of the General Directorate of Elections, DGE. In its announcement, the DGE also emphasized strict regulations regarding electoral spending. The maximum allowable spending limits are set at 12 billion Guinean francs, approximately $1,340,000 for national list and both single-member and multiple-member candidacies in legislative elections, while 7 billion Guinean francs, which is also equivalent to $781,000, has also been set for the municipal lists. According to the General Directorate of Elections, exceeding these spending limits constitute a violation of the Electoral Code and may result in penalties as specified by the law.
Ibrahim Abadi's report there from Conakry and voiced by Christopher Ticho.
This is the newspaper review. Stay abreast and find out what the top stories are in your country.
This is the newspaper review.
The newspaper review.
We return to Banjul and rejoin Sangdana Mendy for the newspaper review.
Let us now take a look at some of the front pages, starting with the Standard newspaper. Assembly recommends ex-Attorney General Tambedu be charged with economic crimes. The National Assembly Committee has recommended that former Attorney General Abubakar Tambedu be investigated and possibly prosecuted for alleged economic crimes linked to the handling of assets belonging to former President Yahya Jammeh. United Democratic Party to discuss critical electoral issue with Independent Electoral Commission, security forces. State slaps more charges on ex-Jongola Manjang. Prosecutors have filed additional charges against alleged Jongola Sana Manjang, expanding the case related to the alleged killings and human rights abuses during the rule of Yahya Jammeh. Let us now turn to Forea newspaper. Residents of Jinak Island calls for alternatives as cannabis farms are destroyed. Residents of Jinak Island are appealing for alternative livelihood and support after security forces destroyed suspected cannabis farms they say many families depend on for income. Former Minister Abbas Sanyang and co-accused plead not guilty in ex-President Yahya Jammeh land case. And finally, we take a look at the Point newspaper. Committee still finds millions in former president's account. Qatar Deputy Ambassador presides over Ramadan food package distribution. And that brings us to the end of today's look at the newspaper headlines. Back to you in the studios.
Many thanks, Sangdana Mendy.
Politics, analysis on major news, social matters, and all. This is A Guest.
In this segment, we focus on Côte d'Ivoire, where Amnesty International is denouncing the continued detention of several people arrested during opposition protests in October 2025. The human rights organization says among the detained individuals are pregnant women and others who had no involvement in the demonstrations. According to Amnesty International, some of the detainees are experiencing deplorable health conditions in prison. Our guest is Claire Ann Felix, a researcher at Amnesty International, West and Central African Bureau.
In October, there were protests that were banned by the government. And so we know that since then, there have been people that have been detained without cause. Those people were going to work or simply close to where the demonstration have taken place. There are a lot of people that are still in pre-trial. And there are also people that have been tried without a lawyer, which is so in conditions that are unfair. And so other detainees that have been denied their rights to visit. So with Amnesty International, we asked the courts to rule on the appeals in accordance with the rights to a fair trial. and also to rule on the first sentence trials. And also we call on the authorities to respect the rights to the detainees.
What's the significant impact, do you think, this continued detention of people or quote-unquote protesters arrested during the October protests in Côte d'Ivoire could have on these detainees or the country in general?
Thank you very much. It's a very good question because it has actually a big impact on the families, on the detainees. So we have been talking with different families. For example, there is one man that is the main breadwinner of a family of 2 children. He's also taking care financially of his sister and his mother, and therefore they're not able to pay the rent or to pay their medication anymore. And also this person has lost his job since he has been detained, and he has been convicted to 36 months of detention. So I would say that for the families of the detainees, this has a huge impact on their social and economic rights.
Why is Amnesty particularly concerned about the 3 pregnant women currently being held at the Abidjan prison complex?
Well, as you can imagine, being pregnant in detention must be very difficult because this is not an environment that is favorable for pregnant women. We have been told that they do not have the prenatal care appropriate. And also we have been told that they're afraid that they would give birth in detention. And again, to give birth in a detention center would not be an appropriate place to give birth.
There is this part of the press statement from Amnesty which says that some detainees had no involvement in the protests. What evidence suggests that innocent bystanders were arrested and imprisoned?
Thank you. So we have been talking to families and we have been talking to lawyers, and they have been telling different stories of people that were not taking part of the demonstration. Some of them they were on their way to work or they were just close to where the detention were taking place, and they did not take part in the demonstration. But even if they did, what we want to emphasize is that in October, Amnesty International denounced the fact that the ban was not in accordance with international law, and that the government should have authorized and managed the demonstration and ensure that they complied with public order. And so what we believe is that those that took part of the demonstration and exercised their right peacefully, so the one that exercised their right to a peaceful assembly, they should be released.
Claire Ann Felix is a researcher at Amnesty International West and Central Africa Bureau. In sport news, the women's national basketball teams of Mali, Nigeria and Senegal are kicking off their 2026 World Cup qualifying campaigns with highly publicized matches. In today's fixtures, Mali faces China, Nigeria battles with Colombia, while Senegal has the daunting task of taking on the United States at the end of the first day. It's a tough start that will serve as a real test of character for the African players in their quest for international glory. And we've come to the end of this edition of Newslink on West Africa Democracy Radio, broadcasting from Dakar, Senegal. Thank you for listening, and many thanks to Mustafa Sek and Maudu Ju for the technical support. Let's keep the conversation coming on all of our social media platforms, X, TikTok, Instagram, and Facebook at WDR English. Coming up at the bottom of the hour is a repeat broadcast of our flagship gender program, 50/50. I am Imo Edit. Good afternoon.
And many thanks to you for listening to Newslink via Hot 104.3 FM,
Hilltop Radio 104.7 FM,
and Veritas Radio 102.9 in Banjul, the Gambia. We also appreciate our listeners in Liberia via Alternative Youth Radio 98.9 FM, Lofa County,
Radio Kagama 94.5 FM, Nibe County, DCN Radio 91.3 FM, Riverside County, Wakat FM Radio, Banga, Liberia, Radio Baf FM 91.3 Sierra Leone in Nigeria, and Love 104.5 FM Abuja.
For you listening via Radio Pad 95.1 Damango, Savannah region, and on Royals FM 104.7 Wenchi, Ghana, we say a big thank you. Remember, West Africa Democracy Radio is all about you, your views, and your opinions.